Hi all, and thanks very much for joining me today. Now we're going to look at one of the most notorious kings of England. Notorious, this word that means somebody's famous but for bad reasons. They're not popular, they're not very well liked, and it's King John. Now some people feel King John has a bad reputation. He's known as being unkind, he's known as being cruel, and known as being greedy. But what I want us to do today is to look at if King John was actually a good king. So before we do that, I want us to start thinking about what makes a good leader. So I've put some pictures up in front of you now of different leaders. Some current, some from the past. Some you'll recognise, some you won't. If you don't recognise them, try and research them. See who they are. But I want you to pause this video now, and I want you to try and come up with the qualities that make a good leader. Try and come up with 4 or 5. Once you've done that, carry on. Now hopefully you've come up with 4 or 5 qualities of a good leader. Now to help us today, I've come up with 4 myself. I suggested a leader should be honest. They should have integrity. And that means telling the truth and being truthful to the people around them, but being truthful to themselves as well. A leader should be brave, courageous. That just doesn't mean being brave physically, but it also means being brave and making difficult decisions when you know you're not going to be popular, but being brave enough to take that decision. They should have knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing what to do. Wisdom is knowing when to do it, maybe. They should be kind and selfless. Kind, helping people around them. Doing what's right for other people, not just for themselves. So that's selfless, putting other people first. So with those qualities in mind, I want to look at King John today. Now King John became king on the 24th of December 1166. His brother, Richard I, had spent all of the nation's money on the Crusades. Richard, known as Richard the Lionheart, had been fighting the Crusades in the Holy Lands. And whilst he'd been away, he'd allowed the barons to become too powerful. So when John became king, he collected taxes to help build up the funds which had been spent by Richard I. He collected a new land tax from the knights and the barons. However, this made him unpopular with the barons. So I want to think, does this make King John a good king or a bad king? Well, I'd suggest this is a good thing he's done. And I've highlighted this for you to see. King John collected taxes to help build up funds which had been spent by Richard I. He collected a new land tax from the knights and the barons. Now I'm going to want you to add this to your notes now. So I'm going to show you what your notes should look like. So you can see that first point is exactly from the PowerPoint. King John collected taxes to help build up funds which had been spent by Richard I. He collected a new land tax from the knights and the barons. But then I've added something else. This is evidence that King John was a wise king because he knew the country needed money. It is also evidence he was kind to the poor and peasants because he asked the wealthy to pay the tax, not the poor. So I've used some of those qualities that we looked at the beginning of the lesson about what makes a good leader to look at King John. Now what I want you to do is copy that down. So pause the video again and make sure you've got that as an example before we carry on. Now let's look at another example. King John modernised the government, ensuring they kept good records of everything. So again, I want you to add that to your notes, but I'm not going to give you an example now. I want you to say what quality of leadership is this looking at. So pause the video and add that to your notes, and then we're going to move on to another one. And now we're going to move on to that he built up his forces in northern England, and as a result the King of Scotland signed a peace treaty with him. So let's add it to the notes. And what quality of leadership is this showing? Again, pause the video, create your notes, and then we're going to move on. So we've got some really good examples of, was King John a good king? But historians need to look at both sides of an argument. They also need to look at what's called the counter argument sometimes, the opposite to what was suggested. So we're now going to add to our notes an opposite point of view. So let's look at our first one. King John collected a new land tax from the knights and barons. However, this made him unpopular with the barons. Well, hold on, we used this earlier, didn't we? We talked about King John creating a new tax and that was good. However, it made him unpopular with the barons. So I want you to add that to your notes. And this time I want you to describe whether this was unwise, whether this was selfish, whether this was cowardly. What kind of act was this to make him a bad king? Pause the video and then create your notes. I also then want you to look at King John exerted his power over the church. This means he tried to control the church. So what kind of leadership quality is that showing if we're seen as a bad king? I'd like to add that to your notes. Finally, King John mounted a huge campaign to reconquer Normandy. This means he went to fight a battle. However, he was badly defeated, and King John was forced to pay a huge sum of 20,000 marks and to concede some lands to France. Now, 20,000 marks, a mark is the currency that was used in Europe, and to concede some lands means he's had to give land up. King John has been defeated. Was he wise to be involved in that battle or unwise? You need to add that to your notes as evidence. So, it's decision time. This is where you, as a historian, have to make a decision. Was King John a good king? Well, we've looked at some evidence. Now it's time for your work. Your assignment is to answer this statement. Some historians argue King John was a good king. Do you agree with this statement? I want you to use 3 paragraphs as your structure. In paragraph 1, I want you to describe 2 reasons why King John was a good king. Now, if you look at your notes, and if you're still not sure, go back in the video and have another look. Paragraph 2, 2 reasons why King John was a bad king. And same again, use your notes or go back into the video. Now, paragraph 3 is your conclusion. This is the only part of the answer where I want to see the words I think or it is my view. Give your opinion. Do you think King John was a good king or do you think he was a bad king? Now, there's no right or wrong answer. It's your opinion, but make sure you give evidence to support your opinion. Remember, point, evidence, explain for the paragraphs, please. I've created a separate video that helps with that structure. Have a look at that if you're not too sure, but it's really important we try and use that structure in our answers. So there we have it. Was King John a good king? As always, if you've got any questions, get in touch with me. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing your work. Thanks very much.